In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Fujifilm X-S10 that we're recording this intro with right now. We're going to look at it up close, as always, take it on a lot of random local tourism as the UK is still under lockdown as we record this. And then we're going to conclude with my thoughts, whether I'd be interested in using it, particularly in travel. Actually, that's where I'm really considering this camera. And yeah, it'll be over to you then in the comments below. So make sure to stay till the end, subscribe, and all that good stuff and other stuff that I'm supposed to say as I'm on YouTube. Yeah, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I don't know. Anyway. When I first got my hands on this camera, I thought, wow, it's actually smaller than it seemed in the images online. I mean, I'd looked at a bunch of comparison shots with the T4, T30 next to this S10, and yeah, it was smaller than the T4 and a little bit chunkier than the T30, but until I got it in my hands, I didn't really appreciate it. It is basically like the T30 with a fat grip attached, which is actually quite welcome for a travel shooter, for me at the very least. Now, we do have the 26.1 megapixel X-Trans CMOS 4 and X-Processor 4 of the T4, so we know the image quality is going to be spot on. It's got 6-stop 5-axis in-body image stabilization, which is extremely welcome, which is something that a lot of us want to see developed on future cameras. We want to see it get into smaller and smaller bodies, so that is definitely a step forward for me. We've got 4K 30p video recording. We do have the touch screen on the back there, fully articulated screen, very, very handy. 18 film modes, including Eternal Bleach and Bypass for what it's worth. Takes the NPW126S battery, which some of us have got quite a lot of, to be fair. It's not as good as the new T4 battery, but it is what it is. Now, as you can see, that goes into the grip along with the SD card. Be careful with the SD card. I had that fly out. And the door itself shuts nicely with the lock. And I think there's a magnesium alloy shell behind this facade. And you can really feel that it does feel quite solid, albeit light, 465 grams. No weather resistance, but you might have used your T30 in some fairly rough conditions with no real bother, so that's fine, at least for me. Now, we do have customizable dials here, and the PASM dial, as people call it, because of the program shutter speed, aperture manual. There's a few redundant features on that for me, but I understand the camera is not necessarily aimed directly at me. That's cool. ISO button and Q button can also be programmed. I'm not a big fan of these record buttons, but it is what it is. It's fine. It's pronounced a little bit too, so it is usable. You've got this quite hard on-off button, which is no big deal for me. The shutter is fine. It's not amazing. It doesn't feel that special, but you know, it's not necessarily a cool looking camera. But after using it for a few weeks, and I've got a little bit more to go, so my conclusion might change a little bit, but I think it's fine. I want a camera to be discreet when I'm traveling about and when I'm working, in fact. And once I blacked out these two bits on my own personal copy, I think I'd be away. That'd be absolutely fine. Now, about that grip, of course, it's quite chunky and it takes away from the usual Fujifilm aesthetic, but it is very comfortable, very practical. I mean, I don't have big hands and it's not perfect for me, but you should get it in your hands before you buy it if possible to see how you get on. Might be more comfortable for you. I'm happy. We do have a pop-up flash, which is something that I never use. Maybe I'll use it for triggering stuff at some point, but I'm not a fan of that kind of flash as it is. So that's redundant for me, but again, not necessarily designed for me. And on this side, I'm happy to note that it has the 3.5mm mic port with this funky little cover. And we've got a solid door there for the USB-C and the HDMI Nothing on that side. On the back, you've got the lever, which feels fine. You've got these two menu OK and display back buttons, which are flush to the body. A little bit of a grip there, a little bit there to complement the front, and that fully articulating screen, which we're used to with the T4 now, works absolutely fine. It's a touch screen too, and yeah, there's a lot more little specs and stuff, but we're not here to read out the specs. I think after my first impressions, I think the camera's grown on me a lot more, and I think in the next couple of weeks too, it will grow on me some more. I'm gonna kind of decide in the conclusion if I want to buy my own, but so far so good. You know, Fujifilm have put out a very decent and competitive camera, albeit I feel pricing is constantly going up these days, but it's probably a whole different conversation. Let's get back out and shoot with it, although the images are basically the same as the T4 effectively, and we're having a lot of grey days at the moment, so these might be quite gloomy, but I'm also testing out a few other bits and pieces, so I'm going to have a bit of fun with it regardless, and then conclude afterwards, and then hear from you guys and girls in the comments below. Having used this over the last month and in varying UK conditions, I've grown to feel more comfortable with this camera. It does feel very well built. It's quite compact, of course, and it's definitely not cheap once you get used to it. While it doesn't have weather resistance, it was perfectly fine when I got caught out in the rain and hail, actually, although I didn't really let it get particularly wet. The customizable dial on the left is another thing that grew on me. In its default state, in single shooting, you can use it to scroll through and select the film simulation and see the changes through the viewfinder as you go through them. Now, while I do like using film simulation bracket, this could be a very cool feature going forward. It'll allow me to slow down even more when choosing how I want my image to come out, and perhaps start to enjoy film simulations that I haven't really been drawn to in the past. The camera performs really well in both AFS and AFC and uses the same focusing system as the T4 and the Pro 3, so eye and face detection generally works a treat. And if you're a manual focus shooter, the camera has the usual brilliant assist that other Fujifilm bodies offer. Having the same sensor and processor, the image quality is superb. It's the same as the Big Brother T4 that we're using here, that we use professionally. Of course, there's a few missing features like dual card slots that would make me think more than twice about using the S10 on a job, but image quality wise, absolutely love it. And I am going to put this back on before anybody gets a bit triggered. The camera is excellent for travel video, B-roll, YouTube stuff. You can go as far as DCI 4K 30p with no crop recording in 428-bit internally. and 4 2.2 10-bit, I think that's how you say it, to an external recorder. I don't go that far. The internal video is spot on for 99.9% of us. It also offers 1080p 240 frames per second, F-Log profiles, and the prized 3.5mm mic jack on the side, which actually I think is well positioned. It's very simple, but it doesn't get in the way of the screen, for example. Particularly when you flick it out, it's nice and clear, unlike the T4 is a little bit iffy for that. You also get a dongle to attach via USB should you want to use headphones, so that is very handy too. Who's it for then? Well, the camera is so capable that it's a little harder to define who it's aimed at, but evidently the controls, the design, the layout overall is going to be more suitable to somebody coming from a, let's say, DSLR background, maybe upgrading from one of those baby Canon or Nikon bodies with the PASM dial. It is a simpler experience overall, but even as somebody who loves the dials and buttons of the other Fujifilm bodies, I soon got used to this almost cleaner look and feel. Now, as for the pricing, compared to other brands with similar tech, let's say, it is very competitive, but I would have expected weather resistance at this price point. The S10 has a lot to love, and maybe with a few tweaks could become my ideal interchangeable lens travel camera. It's certainly a lot more capable than the cameras I used early on in my career, and I think that's food for thought. What with new gear coming out all the time and the latest rumours sending the forums into a frenzy of love and hate, when really we just need to chill out, enjoy and use what we own until we need to move on to something else. I would definitely consider this camera as a go-to travel camera, and I think it would last a good few years to come. Over to you then. Have you tried this camera yet? What do you think? Let us know in the comments below, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.